Good afternoon, everybody. Now we will be starting Jalgaon Mencon Consultant Award Papers. Today's judge, Dr. Sudhir Bhalerao sir. Chairperson sir, Dr. Prasad Swami, Dr. Shreyesh Manglekar sir, and Dr. Venkatesh Polawar sir. First paper to be started.
Going to start the Jalgaon Mencon Consultant Award paper. There are 7 papers here. So I would like to invite the first Dr. Sachin Nagesh Rao Khadkekar. I'm so sorry. Khadkekar. Yeah. So just before we start the paper, we have to stick to the timings. Okay, that is very important. 8 plus 2, 8 minutes is for the paper presentation and 2 minutes is for the question answers. If you exceed your 8 minutes, that means you are covering your 2 minutes question answers. So you're going to miss that points. Okay? Yeah. Yeah, you can start, please.
Good morning, respected judges, chairperson, moderators. Good morning, respected judges, respected moderators, respected chairperson, seniors and my colleagues. I am Dr. Sachin Khadkekar, presenting here the role of tonsils and tonsillectomy in psoriasis management. As we all know that psoriasis is a chronic immune-mediated disease, inflammatory disease characterized by relapses, remissions, exacerbations and intermittent recurrence. Exact etiology and etiopathogenesis is not yet fully understood. Triggering factors for psoriasis are stress, infection, particularly the upper respiratory infection, that to a streptococcal type of tonsillopharyngitis, certain hormonal changes, smoking and alcohol. Basically 4 types of psoriasis have been described: plaque type, gutted type, vulgaris type and pustular and erythrodermic type. So these are the pictures of plaque, gutted and vulgaris and pustular erythrodermic type of psoriasis. Now the psoriasis has got various implications and effects, such as systemic effects. It may induce diabetes, cardiovascular and metabolic changes in the body. It also has got huge impact on the psychosocial status of the patient, right from inducing anxiety, depression, mood disorders and even to the suicidal tendencies. And of course it increases the financial burden over the patient and family because of the excessive use of drugs, medications and the psychological aspects. It increases the comorbid conditions associated, and it has got substantial impact on quality of life, especially moderate to severe type of psoriasis cases. And it increases the mortality and reduces the life expectancy of the patients. Now basically 4 approaches for psoriasis control is the use of topical drugs, phototherapy, systemic drugs and biological drugs. Now the exact etiology and etiopathogenesis of psoriasis is not yet fully understood. There are different theories that postulates that it appears to be a T-cell mediated disease in which certain T-cells which are present in the primed against the streptomycal M proteins in the tonsils may cross-react with epitomes from the human keratins which are responsible for exacerbation of psoriasis. Patients with psoriasis can have recurrence and worsening of disease after upper respiratory infection, especially the tonsillopharyngitis streptococcal type. Now the streptococcus has got pyrogens named as S pyrogens that has a M protein which acts as a super antigen in the pathogenesis of psoriasis. Now these super antigens are the products that can bypass the normal immunological pathways and cause powerful stimulation of immune system that leads to the production of T lymphocytes, which plays significant role in the development of psoriasis. Now these certain prime T cells are present in the tonsils, palatine tonsils. Now in this study, an attempt has been made to find out and establish the correlation between the psoriasis, upper respiratory tract infections, especially the tonsillopharyngitis streptococcal 1 and the tonsillectomy. Now it has been postulated that psoriasis might be initiated by streptococcal superantigens and maintained by T cells that recognize streptococcal M protein determinants in the palatine tonsils and homologous keratin determinants in the skin. Now this indicates that palatine tonsils may generate effector T cells that recognize keratin peptides in the skin and worsen psoriasis. There exist close relations between the degree of clinical improvement in psoriasis and reduction in the frequency of immune markers and skin homing T cells in the circulation. After tonsillectomy, there occurs subsequent decrease in the skin homing T cells that may result in improvement of psoriasis. So these are the molecular changes occurring in the tonsils peripheral blood, where there are excessive CD4, CD8 positive T cells. They recognize the streptococcal antigens, and it will lead to the production of immune markers, beta-1 integrin and CCR6. Now, exactly not yet fully understood in which type of immunological pathway being stimulated. Now, usually these immunochemical changes, they bypass the normal immunological system of the body and stimulate the inflammatory immune axis that will lead to the production or activation of interleukin-1, interleukin-36, and lead to the various infiltration of neutrophil chemokine expression, causing the pustule formation and the various active lesions that are seen in psoriatic lesions. Now, this provides biologically plausible module for benefit of tonsillectomy in psoriasis. Now, in this study, 86 dermatologically diagnosed psoriatic patients who had exacerbation after recurrent attacks of tonsillopharyngitis have been studied, grouped into two groups. The group A, 43, who have undergone tonsillectomy, and group B, where the surgery is not performed. After tonsillectomy, the disease course was followed for 3 years, and disease severity was assessed by the observer blinded dermatologist using psoriasis area and severity index score, that is PASI. So this is the age-wise distribution of psoriasis, where mostly commonly seen in third and fourth decade, where male to female ratio is 1.4:1. Now here the different types of psoriasis seen in the groups. Most common type of psoriasis in group A, that is the gutted type of psoriasis seen, followed by the chronic plaque type, and in group B, where the tonsillectomy is not done, the psoriasis type is seen as the chronic plaque type, followed by gutted type. Now, here is a distribution-wise the improvement score. As we see that there occurs significant reduction in the PASI score ranging from 45 to 95% seen in the patients undergone in tonsillectomy, where the exacerbation usually occurs after the tonsillopharyngitis attack. So these are the improvements seen after tonsillectomy over the periods. Now, in this study, the total number of patients were 86, out of which 43 undergone tonsillectomy. And out of these 43, 36 patients, that is 83%, showed significant improvement in the lesions. So, majority of patients showed 50% reduction in the psoriatic lesions, experienced improvement at 3 months and maintained for 3 years. Aim of the study was to focus on relation between the psoriasis exacerbation and the tonsillopharyngitis, especially the streptococcal one. So there are the previous studies where the studies being done and the follow-up was 5 years, where the results were seen ranging from 32% to 94%. In our study, we found significant improvement up to 83%. Now, after tonsillectomy, there occurs improvement in psoriatic lesions, improvement in the psychosocial status, and reduction in the duration of drug treatment and adverse effects. Exacerbation of chronic psoriasis can be associated with streptococcal throat infections and T cells that respond to the peptide sequences common to the streptococcal M proteins and skin keratins which are found in blood. These findings strongly establish that there exists a strong bond or correlation between the tonsillitis, and psoriatic exacerbation, and this enhances the role of tonsillectomy in reducing the exacerbations. Now, this study can reinforce the growing evidence of relationship between chronic psoriasis and tonsillectomy with therapeutic relevance.
Your time is already over. Huh?
Yes, sir.
You're consuming your question answer time.
Yes, sir, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So to conclude, tonsillectomy may be effective potential treatment option as an assisted option for psoriasis to control the exacerbations. Tonsillectomy appears to reduce the frequency of autoreactive T cells by improving the psoriatic lesions. Now, it might be expected that patients who report history of psoriatic exacerbations with tonsillopharyngitis might respond better to tonsillectomy than psoriatic patients who do not flare up with exacerbations of tonsillopharyngitis. These are the references. Now, as such, there was, being a psoriasis is a chronic lesion where the pain is unbearable, stress is unbearable. So in these conditions, there are different modalities being tried. दर्द ही दवा बन जाता है. मैं कहना चाहूँगा इशरत खतरा है दरिया में फना हो जाना, दर्द का हद से गुजरना है दवा हो जाना. लेकिन in this storm of psoriatic, wild storm of psoriasis, tonsillectomy can become a lighthouse, giving a strong direction in the management of psoriasis. Of course, it will something come out of this storm to help the psoriatic patients. My mother, being a psoriatic patient, was a constant source of inspiration and motivation for the research work. Thank you for patient listening.
Just one question I would like to ask, okay, because already you have consumed your
Sir.
question. You had said that you have 83% result.
Yes.
So what was the reason for the 17% failure when
Exact-
you had given already done a tonsillectomy?
Yes, sir.
So what was the reason? Why this 17% didn't improve?
Yes, sir. Of course, we are expecting a much more result in all 43 patients who have undergone tonsillectomy. But since it's a exact etiopathogenesis is not known, which exactly immuno axis has been stimulated or responsible for the exacerbation. So that's why these seven patients couldn't give improvement of psoriatic lesions of tonsillectomy.
Okay. And with all due respect to your mother, okay, everything. But whenever you present a paper for any competition, okay, there should not be any identity revealed with the institute or anything and no photographs personal to it. Don't take it, okay? My
Sir,
due respect to your
sorry,
mother.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
So actually, what were the criteria? Means why only 43 were operated, depending upon the sites and the lesions of psoriasis?
No, just
or
as randomly we are divided
it was
into
done
two groups.
randomly?
Yeah, random divisions, and those all
But
86
suppose
patients.
those patients were not operated, then do you think they will improve?
No, all 86 patients were having exacerbation after tonsillopharyngitis, but just as a control group, we have divided into two groups and operated 43 ones.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Sapna Ramakrishna Parab, she will be speaking on PRF sheets in middle ear surgery.
Good afternoon, seniors, judges, and senior colleagues. Today I'm going to talk about platelet. Good afternoon, seniors and my dear friends. Today I'm going to talk about platelet-rich fibrin sheets in endoscopic middle ear surgery. I'm Dr. Sapna Parab and I work in Talegaon. So we must have frequently got some problems during mastoid healing and tympanoplasty that may be graft-related or maybe due to inadequate addressal of the ventilation pathway or persistent conductive hearing loss or discharge. So the question arises, is there any role for the use of PRF sheets? So definitely we all know that PRF or PRP, that platelet-rich plasma, has been extensively used in other allied branches. So why not to use it in ENT and try to see if there is any augmentation of results? So basically, the aim of my study was to analyze and put forward the applications, indications, and the need for use for PRF sheets during endoscopic middle ear surgery. It's a retrospective, non-randomized clinical observational study. We have been using a PRF since 2018. And 269 cases have been included. However, the study period is from January 2021 to December 2022, with 161 females and 108 males. No case of traumatic perforation was included. It was operated by two surgeons, endoscopic by the endoscopic approach with a two-handed technique using the endoscope holder. And we included all cases of chronically discharging ear, along with mastoidectomy, tympanoplasty, as well as ossiculoplasties. So this is how we obtain the blood, venous blood from the dorsalis pedis, which has been subjected to centrifuge machine for 3,500 RPM for 15 minutes. And what you got to get over here is the coagulum, which is taken by sterile techniques by the surgical assistant, and the PRP is also, plasma is also aspirated with a 2 cc syringe and kept separately, which can be used later on for during the steps of tympanoplasty. And next, after you get the jelly-like clot or the coagulum, that is placed on the ASM grid, and then what we do is, with the help of a Merosil piece, we press these jelly-like clot to make into the PRF sheets. And then, as you can see on this ASM grid, you have multiple markings which you can make the specific sizes of 10 by 5 mm size. So these are the results of 269 cases. This is the tabulation of the bar diagram. So basically what I've said is we do by the endoscopic technique with the endoscope holder. So the technique is inside-out clearance with the anticoenterostomy and mastectomy. Disease is cleared from the ventilation pathway. SOS, if there is need for ossiculoplasty reconstruction, it's being done. And over here what you can see, different indications. We have extended the indications of PRF not only for TM reconstruction but over microerosions over the promontory. In this video, you can see the microerosions. Over here, there are microerosions over the incus, which we have placed the PRF sheet over here. So basically, microerosions where there is no need of proper ossiculoplasty, you can use the PRF sheets. So there are multiple other indications in which we have been using it. I have tabulated it, I'll be showing. So this is another case in which after the position of the graft and the tympanomeatal flap, the PRF sheets are being placed meticulously in a way so as to allow the epithelialization. So this is another case back again. So again over here, over the microerosions over the promontory where the PRF sheets are being used. So basically what it helps in, neither the results, I wouldn't say that there is increase in the airborne gap or nothing. The conductive component is taken care by the graft. What we are aiming at is the epithelialization. Earlier epithelialization, and the graft is seen well epithelialized within 8 to 10 days. Most of the cases in tympanoplasties and within 15 days in case of mesh surgery. So these are the various intraoperative use in MRM, which can range right from microear erosions to the fallopian canal, bony erosions to LSC erosions to the erosions of the carotid, jugular bulb as well as the sinus plate. So it is used in addition to perichondrium to cover the erosions. So basically when we have tabulated all our results of 269 patients, what we would say, well epithelialized results in earlier epithelialization, residual graft definitely reduced because epithelialization over the tympanomeatal flap would be held by the PRF. Hearing improvement is not much difference between the routine techniques and without PRF. Cavity definitely healing is better with the PRF. So this is the airborne gap with endoscopic T-plasty, which is within 10 to 12 AB decibels, and in case of endoscopic MRM over 2 years, it is about 20 to 25 dB hearing loss. So final results, I would say we have evaluated in terms of time taken for epithelialization. Post-op, definitely there was no statistical difference between the groups without the PRF. Incidence of residual cholesteatoma are definitely reduced because of use of endoscope holder, nothing to do with the PRF. Minimal infection because you are rejuvenating the epithelium over there, and high mechanical survival. I wouldn't go into details of what is PRF. We all know PRF consists of fibrin matrix, which is rich in cytokines, and it's excellent biomaterial which has excellent applications in all other surgical branches along with the dentistry and dermat. And the release of the clot growth factors starts from about 5 minutes to 10 minutes post-surgery. So various nutrients or growth factors which are present range from platelet-derived growth factors, transforming growth factors, vascular endothelial growth factors. So these act at different levels, whether at angiogenesis, synthesis of the, stimulates the synthesis of the collagen in the basal lamina, or fibroblast production. So our proposed indications or extended applications of PRF sheets is not only in tympanoplasty but in middle ear over erosions of promontory, facial nerve, micro ear ossicular erosions to create a pseudo capsule over the IH joint to cover the eroded jugular carotid. Also in etic and antrum in which there are erosions as well as tegmen enteroid, dural plate, sinus plate, and over the external auditory canal over the tympanomeatal flap which has been placed, and to mention over here, not as a graft material for tympanoplasty. So conclusion, it is completely autologous, easy to prepare, has minimal expense, possesses prolonged growth factors released over 3 hours during surgery. So PRF definitely provided healthy epithelialization and successful graft uptake without any complications. No statistical difference between PRF and without PRF control groups. Limitations, it's a small group, single center study. We need to have more quantification and more centers involved for it. Thank you.
One question, Dr. Sapna.
Yes, sir.
When we do a hemogram and a platelet count,
Yes, sir.
okay, we see a lot of different counts, you know. Some physiological also, the patient is having a low platelet count, okay, and some having a rich. So, does the platelet count, you know, does it affect your outcome of the PRF sheet?
Yes. So very good question, sir, because we have been doing this. What we have not done in all 269 patients, but in about 20 patients, what we did is we took the patients whose platelet count was pretty good, that is within 4 lakhs, and we...
Okay, so that's the criteria.
No, it should be within the normal range, but what we did was...
Normal range is the range from 1,50,000.
Yeah, we have done in all the patients, sir. But what I would like to stress over here, what we did is we subjected extra PRF for again pathological diagnosis, and we compared the pre-operative blood counts of platelet with the platelet count of the PRF clot, and it was more because it was basically a concentrate of platelet.
You should mention that in your criteria.
No, this
Okay,
was just, this is not a part of the study, so
Yeah.
just out of curiosity we happened to do it.
Do you use these PRF sheets as obliteration of the mastoid cavity?
And no, sir, we use it for soft wall neomastoid reconstruction. So we do not
Suppose you
obliterate.
place the sheets, so over that what do you do for
So
obliteration?
what we do is the basic thing is whenever PRF is used, PRF is basically it is rich in growth factors, and the basic thing what has been hypothesized by us is wherever it is placed, it will give rise to the original tissue what was existing over there. For example, when it is placed used for dermat, it would rejuvenate the collagen and give anti-aging criteria. Same thing if it is used in the mastoid erosions over the etic or the antrum, because it's a thin like a elastic and it get absorbed within 8 days. The basic thing, it does not persist, it absorbed within 8 days. So it will form over 6 hours post surgery or during surgery. It would release the growth factors and it would form the mucosa which was inherent to that place. It would neither obliterate nor cause obstruction in the space. And we use it routinely for soft wall reconstruction where a neomastoid space is kept beneath the cartilage, and we use it as a sequential layers of cartilage, PRF, perichondrium, and the bone paste, which is bone dust mixed with the antibiotic eye drops.
Are there any centers in the Western world, and have you compared your results with them?
So unfortunately, in abroad they do not use PRF. Sir.
They have not yet.
No, ours is the
yours
only
is
country which uses it.
According to you, yours is the only center. which has
No,
been
sir.
used?
Ours is not the only center. There may be many centers which are using PRP and PRF for TM reconstruction.
In
And my
India.
paper is of PRF in mastoid and the extended indications and how to make the PRF clot into PRF sheets. So as to, because otherwise it's a jelly-like clot which would obliterate. So we are making it into nice sheets so that it can be placed beautifully.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
sir.
completing in time. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So first we withdraw the blood, dorsalis pedis. It is kept in the centrifuge machine at 3500 RPM for 15 to 20 minutes. Then it is removed out, and the jelly clot, what you get, it releases, because there's a beautiful study done by Chokran et al. Which says that this jelly clot would release growth factors from 60 minutes to 300 minutes, so post surgery. So even after it's placed, it will do its work of producing the growth factors. Yeah. Yes, so we do it intraoperative only. Just 10 minutes before starting the case or when the graft is being taken, we withdraw the blood. It is done. It's done fresh, sterile in the OT, sir. Yeah. So in the literature, there is not use of PRF for mastoid surgery. So they are recommending only, there are certain studies in which PRP, plasma, is, but there is no study, this is the first study, sir. Yes, sir, we have put forward it for the international journal, waiting for their review, sir. Yes, sir, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Respected chairpersons, judges and friends, my presentation today is on malignant otitis externa. This is currently an emerging scourge in ENT. It's a severely potentially life-threatening aggressive infection of the external auditory canal that can rapidly spread to the temporal bone and skull base, ultimately leading to intracranial complications and death. My objective was to provide an overview of malignant otitis externa, which is a currently emerging scourge in our practice. Why this occurs in old age? Geriatric population is more prone to cleaning their ears due to dry and itchy skin. Diabetes in addition alters the pH of the extraordinary canal and predisposes to infection by altering the immune response. These are the risk factors, diabetes being on the top, then immunosuppressive therapy, HIV patients, malnutrition, transplantees. Etiopathogenic, infection after trivial trauma to external canal such as ear pricking, crude cleaning or oral irrigation starts as cellulitis of deep periauricular tissue, later on spreads through the fissures of Santorini to the adjoining skull base, causing periostitis, osteitis, chondritis, osteomyelitis and multiple cranial nerve palsies. Incidence has increased in recent years due to increase in awareness of the disease, better diagnostic modalities and increase in geriatric and diabetic population in India. The spread occurs superiorly to involve the dura and the intracranial extension. It goes anteriorly to the TM joint, the masticatus muscles, the parotid gland, the buccal spaces. Then it goes posteriorly to the mastoid bone and medially to the petrous apex, the parapharyngeal fatty tissue and the paraclival soft tissue. Demography, mine was a retrospective study for a period of 2 years at a tertiary care center. Totally 17 cases were studied. 2 presented in the early stage, whereas 15 were in the advanced stage. 15 were males and 2 females in the age group of 60 to 80 years. All had uncontrolled type 2 diabetes mellitus. 4 patients also had chronic kidney disease. 3 had ischemic heart disease with a history of bypass surgery. Most of my patients, all of them rather presented with nocturnal ear pain and persistent ear discharge. 5 had facial weakness. On examination, 2 had minimal granulations, whereas 10 had extensive granulations, 5 had polyps, and canal edema was there in 15% of the cases. Facial nerve involvement was seen in 6 patients and multiple cranial nerve palsy was seen in 1. All had mixed hearing loss, rather 15. Organism isolated Pseudomonas aerugina was on the top, then followed by polymicrobials, and fungi were isolated in 2 patients. Biopsy of granulations or polyps were done in 3 patients. Medical treatment was given to all 17. Surgical was in 1, extensive surgical. Outcome, 2. We lost 2 patients, complete recovery was seen in 6, lost for follow-up 2 and under follow-up 7 patients. These are the clinical photographs, some of the patients showing the facial nerve palsy, and the third patient in the blue shirt had anterior extension to the TM joint and the masticator space. Few of the endoscopic pictures showing the granulations and polyps with the debris and narrowing of the external canal. Cranial nerve involvements via the stylomastoid foramen, the facial is involved, via the jugular, the 9th, 10th and 11th, through the hypoglossal, the 12th, and the petrous apex, 5th and 6th cranial nerve. CT and MRI adjuncts to a clinical diagnosis showing the mastoiditis, and in the second picture, the MRI shows the extension to the TM joint and the masticator space. We medically manage by giving 6 weeks IV antibiotics based on culture sensitivity report, anti-pseudomonal penicillin, piperacillin, tazobactam, or fluoroquinolones, especially ciprofloxacin, 400 mg BID were the initial drugs of choice. Other antibiotics used were avibactam, aztreonam, and meropenem. Metronidazole and trinidazole were also used. Local anti-pseudomonal antibiotic ear drops in the form of Ciplox, neomycin, polymyxin, and acetic acid also were used. Antifungal ear drops were used whenever required. Aggressive and adequate control of diabetes, correction of electrolyte imbalance, and measures to boost immunity were the add-on treatments. Pain management was by NSAIDs and opioid analgesics. Suction cleaning SOS, simultaneous weekly monitoring included CBC with ESR, C-reactive protein, RFT, and electrolytes. Surgical treatment was limited to biopsy of granulations, oral polypectomy, and debridement of skull base osteomyelitis was done by a neurosurgeon in one case. Highlights: 2 patients in our case series presented with ear pain and minimal granulation in the floor of external auditory canal at the osteocartilage junction. They were treated with 6 weeks of oral ciprofloxacin 500 mg twice a day and topical ciprofloxacin ear drops with acetic acid. LFT and RFT pre and post therapy were done. On follow-up, they were symptomatically better and EAC was normal. The duration between the first symptom and initiation of treatment was shown to be a promising parameter for the prediction of prognosis. Thus, early diagnosis is directly proportional to good prognosis. The first case was reported by Tolmarch. Chandler coined the term in 1968. Incidence is 0.221 to 1.19 per 1 lakh population. Mortality was very high initially. Now it has come down to 15 to 20%. It affects geriatric patients and the commonest organism is Pseudomonas. Patients present with deep-seated otalgia out of proportion to clinical signs despite of analgesia cover, persistent otorrhea despite treatment with topical antibiotic ear drops, and hearing loss and fullness. Ear examination shows edema with or without polyp and granulations. Granulations at osteocartilage junction is the hallmark. Image modalities are adjuncts, HRCT and MRI. Long-term, early, prolonged use of anti-pseudomonal and antimicrobes play a key role. Role of surgery is limited. Advanced disease leads to cranial nerve involvement. To conclude, it's a rare but a deadly disease, remains a pathology which is challenging. Early diagnosis and initiation of aggressive therapy plays a key role. CT, MRI are adjuncts. The duration should be not less than 6 weeks. Radioisotopes like technetium-99 and gallium help to monitor the response of the treatment. White cell count inflammatory markers like ESR and CRP were found to be important factors. Together we can make a difference. Let's join hands to increase awareness of this emerging ENT scourge and reduce the mortality to 0%. These are my references. Thank you.
You said the surgical management is limited to biopsy only.
Yes, sir.
And on one
Biopsy.
slide you said that surgical debridement will be done by the neurosurgeons.
Yes, sir.
So that means what actually?
In all of our 17 patients, sir, 2 were early, so they didn't need anything, and 15 of the 15 patients, we were doing only surgical intervention. Surgical intervention by taking granulation biopsy, polyp biopsy. And then one patient had multiple cranial nerve palsies and facial nerve palsy also, and 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve palsy. He was not happy when we told him that surgery is not going to be this. He went to a neurosurgeon and got himself operated for skull base osteomyelitis. We lost that patient after 2 days of surgery. So that was the patient who went out.
I mean, all these 17 cases,
Yes,
didn't
sir.
you find any role of mastectomy surgery, clearance of the disease in the middle ear?
No, sir.
So you managed all the 17 cases medical line of treatment?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Have you heard of something called as silver nitrate cauterization? Have you heard?
No, sir.
For malignant otitis externa?
No, sir.
Okay.
Because
you
pH.
you can research.
Okay, okay, sir. Acetic acid was used for reducing the pH, sir.
Why surgery was not done?
So because we thought that more extensive, like we could, if we do mastectomy, we are going to control only the posterior spread of the disease. Whereas this disease is known to spread superiorly, medially, inferiorly, posteriorly to petrous apex also.
At
So
least
only
by
handling
removing the disease
mastoid-
by doing a mastoid surgery or extended mastectomy, at least you can relieve some symptoms and pain. Don't you think so?
But after 6 weeks of therapy, most of our patients had pain relief, sir, with IV antibiotics.
With medical treatment.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Our next presentation by Dr. Sanjay D. Bhagat.
So, I'll be speaking on revolutionizing tonsil surgery, insights into microscopic coblation tonsillectomy. So, tonsillectomy has been a significant advancement right from Guliton method to dissection, microdebrider, laser, and now I'll be speaking on microscopic assisted coblation technique for tonsillectomy. The primary advantage of is the ability to observe the detailed anatomy of the extracellular space. Extracapsular space. It is basically a controlled ablation where there is volumetric tissue removal by molecular dissociation, releasing plasma. And plasma breaks the tissue molecular bands and disintegrates the cells. Now, coming to the disadvantages of the direct vision tonsillectomy, because it gives a narrow surgical field and thereby exclude the assistant. Unlike in case of microscopic assisted tonsillectomy, and as per the recent figures of Ministry of Health, you all know that number of resident seats are increasing day by day, and there is difficulty in learning for, so this procedure where we can record, show our residents, and right from the plane of dissection to technique of the tonsillectomy can be shown on the monitor itself. So it's a good learning tool. Coming to the anatomy, it is anteriorly formed by, palatine tonsils are anteriorly formed by anterior facial pillars, posteriorly by the posterior facial pillar. Base is formed by dorsal surface of the posterior third of the tongue, and most important in coblation tonsillectomy is lateral wall, which is formed by superior constrictor mainly and paratonsillar vein, which is the one of the main site of bleeding. So what is the advantage of microscopic dissection tonsillectomy or microscopic assistance? Ease of dissection, precise plane we can find with microscopic dissection. There is minimal blood loss, or absolutely you can say no blood loss in most of the cases, and it's a good recording, that is teaching and learning tool. So now coming to the position of the patient. I learned this technique on myself, seeing most of the videos and in conferences. Initially I struggled for position of the patient. Then one of my friends told me that just decline the head of the patient, now you can do the tonsillectomy in sitting position. So this is my setup of microscopic assisted tonsillectomy. So here I'm performing the procedure. And you don't need much instrument. You need only coblation band and this tonsil holder. That's it, and a suction and a few gauze pieces. So regarding the technique, so what happens exactly when you start the coblation procedure, there is constriction of the palatoglossus muscle and uvula comes in between. So what we do, we keep a gauze piece in between uvula and tonsil which protects uvula every time. And in all our cases, we do ligation of the lower pole. As a rule, why we do ligation of the lower pole even after coblating the inferior pole of the tonsil? Because in most of us or few of us, they are worried about the bleeding after tonsillectomy. Most of the studies, is one of the largest meta-analysis shows that there is 4.1% or 4.1% bleeding percentage. There are few other studies which are showing that 9.5%, DV et al. 5.4%. So what I started my coblation tonsillectomy from May 22. Initially I started with dissection and later on followed by coblation to learn the technique. Initial 14 cases and later on I am doing complete procedure with my coblation, almost 58 cases, and absolutely till now touchwood we don't have any came across any primary or secondary hemorrhage after tonsillectomy. I think we are ligating the lower pole. Maybe that may be the reason. Now this is the initial learning of the coblation tonsillectomy. Initially I gave an incision with our conventional 12-number blade and trying to find the plane with Freers catheter, Freers suction elevator. And now I am shifting to, now I am finding the plane. Because this is the most difficult. So now just I found the plane, that extra capsular plane I found with the dissection. This is my initial learning of coblation tonsillectomy. So now you can see that nice white plane. Now I am shifting over to the coblation and proceeding gradually, because this takes some time to learn this procedure. So now this I am dissecting the tonsil. I am in the extracapsular plane of the tonsil, and this is how I started learning. Now this is another case with complete by coblation, incision given by coblation, protection of the uvula. Now I am trying to find out the plane with the coblation, and this you can see, you can see a nice plane in between. And this is how we go to the lower pole and ligate the lower pole as a rule. Now this is another case. This case I did last week. So this is how as you perform the procedure, you learn the things, especially in the private setup. So now here so I am just dissecting with I use a UVAC 70 extra band with 7/3 setting of coblation in tonsillectomy. So now I am going to my the lower pole of the tonsil, and as a rule I just catch it and coblate also the lower pole and cut it out. So just I'll be catching it with the Wilson forceps and I coblate and remove the tonsil and ligate the lower pole. So these are various papers on PubMed showing the results of microscopic coblation tonsillectomy and its superiority. So what is the exact take-home message is that you get a very good magnified view in microscopic assistant, and microscope is available in all the centers. All of us are having microscope. Just it takes some time to learn the procedure, and if you take 15-30 minutes for dissection tonsillectomy, you will take 45 minutes for microscopic assistance. But it's a good learning tool. There is a less chance of intraoperative and secondary hemorrhage. What I recommend is it's not because I won't be able to recommend because the study has not yet been published, but because we need a big sample size for that. So lower pole ligation is good in my hand, at least in these cases which I had shown you, and there is less post-operative pain score because you find a proper plane in the extra capsular plane. There is and it's a definitely a good learning and teaching tool. You can show your residents, you can show your colleagues, and what exactly you are doing, you can show it. So this is a very good tool. That's what I feel, a microscopic assistant. So the use of operating microscope does not simply enhance the field of vision, but also offers an innovative change in surgical approach. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Dr. Sanjay,
Yes.
I have been using coblation since 2012, and almost I have done thousands of coblation tonsillectomy. But believe me, I have never ligated the inferior pole when I'm doing with the. I mean, it is ridiculous. Why you are ligating it when you're using a coblation? What is the indication? I mean, you're not confident on your coblator?
No, I am confident, sir.
Then?
But still, this because I had talked to my friends and that they are saying that there is because some of the
No.
patients have
Do
secondary
you think
hemorrhage.
that do you think that if you have a secondary hemorrhage or if it bleeds, does it bleed only from the
No, not
lower
only
pole?
for. Now, this is your technique, sir.
Then you should tie the superior pole. Then you should tie the bleeders also, because
Not
there
only
are
lower pole, sir.
there are muscles also exposed.
Yes, sir.
Isn't
that's,
it?
That's the point. That's the
Okay.
point, sir. That's the point.
Second thing, I have never used a microscope when I'm doing a tonsillectomy. I believe. I mean, it's my opinion to it. So I don't feel there is a very big advantage of it. It's not very convincing, frankly speaking, that using a microscope and when you're doing a tonsil, I mean, it's very big. Yeah, you can directly see it, very near vision. You can you can get a very good plane. Okay. What you can see is all the micro bleedings there. You'll get more tensed.
No, sir, not really. But when you'll shift to microscope, sir, then you will find a
It's
lip.
not good. It's,
No, sir, no, sir.
I mean, I'm.
When you shift to microscope, you will definitely find a difference because there are few maybe there in the audience also. They must be using microscope or coblation.
When you're doing a recording, when you're doing an academic research, when you do the thing, that's really good. Or maybe maybe when at your initial stage, when you're learning curve. At that time, you can use a microscope.
I'm in initial stage.
This thing. You are doing it since 22, 2
Yeah,
years.
yes, yes,
Now
yes,
you are not.
yes.
You are not
Maybe.
a bachchi. Yeah, no.
But loops or microscope both are good, sir. But loops disadvantage loops that you can't record the things. But definitely, if you are doing microscopic tonsillectomy, sir, sorry, sir, I'll not So, but if you'll shift to microscope, you'll definitely find a difference. That's what, because I had tried to do with direct vision also, but its microscopic is definitely superior.
Thousands of tonsillectomy with coblation. I had only one case of
bleed, post-op bleed, not exactly on the 10th day. And that also later on I found out that the Bachu had a factor 8 deficiency.
Oh, unlike.
With a lot of research we did. And because we did the PTCT, everything, every PT, everything was normal.
Coagulation is
But
great in
factor
your
eight-
hands.
Yes,
That's
but because of we did with coagulation, I mean, this thing, Dr. Meghna sir will agree with it. He's a pioneer in that. To it.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thanks, sir.
Exactly, that ligation of lower pole is really not needed when you do a combination.
That I'll take this. This will be take home message for me.
If
sir.
you are in the correct plane and do it properly, there is no need to ligate.
Yes, sir.
Because I also do
I'll
many
try. I'll
times.
try to do it
And second
without
thing,
ligation.
microscope is actually, it is only for teaching purpose or showing purpose, or what is the reason why you do?
All cases, all cases of mine are doing. I am doing in under
is not at all
microscope, sir.
required, because you can do it with naked eye, with coagulator or traditional.
But there is difference, sir. Sir also will agree if microscope.
Yeah,
If sir is using microscope, I had seen him. I had seen
I
Vikas
would like to
Agarwal.
ask the Meghnath sir,
Yes.
what is,
Yeah.
Your outcomes will be much better with microscope because you are having a microscope.
does it take more time?
No. And what's your opinion about
But you should be
ligating the inferior pole?
well versed with microscopic tonsillectomy. Means suppose a new person is doing a coagulator tonsillectomy and using microscope for the, means if he is not used to do it, then it may take long time. No. The only thing is because ear surgery doesn't matter much because you are doing it under local or adult patients are there. In tonsillectomy and this thing, usually we are operating on children. So as far as possible, we should reduce the time of anesthesia also. Say. Okay. In your hands it's okay, but everybody.
My hands, in all our resident hands also,
In our hands also, sir. It's very less. It's very less.
say 6 minutes max. 6 minutes.
I do it in 10 to 15 minutes.
The good part is you need not wait for the hemostasis, and you will be able to identify the small bleeders as well using the microscope. Definitely, so you will be more comfortable. Once you start using the microscope, you will say this is the best.
Yeah.
We will try that now.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
As you say, you use a microscope instead of microscope because the bulk of the microscope comes in the way. So, as for documenting purpose, if we use an endoscope or something, just like
Sir.
It's same, sir.
Endoscope will come in way, sir. Endoscope will come in way. Microscope will not come. Your both hands are free and you are operating.
Then you need to look at the screen and do it.
Yeah, you will see at the lenses.
It is like ear surgery. There is a distance.
Sir, I think here, sir, endoscope will give only one view. So whereas with microscope you will have binocular view and depth perception will be better. And with endoscope also you may get the depth perception by when you move the endoscope in and out you will get the depth perception. But you attach it to a fixed stand, then you will lose the depth perception.
Yeah.
So,
Magnification.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
And
Thank you,
magnification.
doctor. Thank you so much.
In case your both hands are also free and microscope is fixed, you don't have to move like endoscope. So advantage is there definitely, but only debatable question is it required?
Yeah, Dr. Sambhaji Chintare. Next presentation, please.
Good afternoon to all the respected judges, teachers and dear colleagues. My topic of presentation is our experience of 20 cases of oral mucocele. As we know, the mucocele is one of the most common benign soft tissue tumor present in the oral cavity. There are two types. One is extravasation and second one is the retention cyst. The clinical presentation in respect to the site size, appearance, etiology, symptoms are important to differentiate these benign lesions from the pre-malignant lesion. The lesions of oral cavity, their surgical excision and histopathological confirmation are necessary. The objective of the study is to study the etiology and clinical presentation of mucocele, to study the surgical management and histopathological finding of the mucocele. This is the hospital-based prospective studies from 2060 to 2070. The patient detailed history and examination of ear, nose, throat and oral cavity is done. All the patients were followed up period for 2 years. For the recurrence, the study variable includes age, gender, type, site, etiology and symptoms of mucocele. These are the different types of mucosals which occurs in the oral cavity, starting from the lip, tongue, floor of mouth. This is involvement of the cheek and the palate, all in the oral cavities, depending upon the sites. The study includes 20 cases in each, 30 are the males and 7 are females. In the study of the 16, mean age group is the 16.6 year. Male to female ratio is 1.8 to 1. Most common histological finding of mucocele is extravasation. Least common histological finding were retention cyst. The peak age of occurrence is the second decade of life. Lower lip is the most common site for the mucocele. Least common site were cheek, submandibular and submental regions. The common symptoms was difficulty in speech and chewing. The history of trauma appears the major etiological factor in the most of the cases of the mucocele. All these 18 mucocele surgically excised were marsupialized with a follow-up recurrence is seen in 3 cases. Our study include 2 cases of rare presentation of mucocele. In one, the mucocele present in the right submandibular region, extending to the submental region and posteriorly up to the angle of mandible. This is the diagrammatic pictures of the huge submandibular and submental swelling extending to the submandibular space with the floor of mouth. This is the CT scan finding that is start from submandibular region up to the clavicle, up to the mid hyoid bone, and then submandibular gland with a specimen. This is the specimen. In another case, there was the huge case with the submental mucocele that is occurring. This was the recurrent case of this submucous retention cyst. The axial and the sagittal CT scan finding suggestive of this submental mucocele. On histopathological aspect of these lesions range from the acute inflammatory intermingling with a mucus collection to pattern of the mature lesion with a scarce amount of mucus and connective tissue fibrosis. This is the histological picture of the cyst, and this is the ranula. On discussion, mucocele is a clinical term used to depict the swelling brought about by the pooling of saliva from the disjoint and impeded minor salivary gland duct, properly obstruction of the duct. It is a self-constricting mucus containing blister of salivary organs normally happening in the oral cavity with generally quick onset with fluctuating size. The oral mucocele of this study similar to this finding matches with the studies of previous study Jaini et al. Studies. Oral mucocele rarely causing significant problem, discomfort, interfere with the speech, mastication, swallowing. External swelling may occur depending upon the size and location of the mucocele. All these symptoms were present in our study with varying intensity. The age, gender, oral sites differ according to the type of oral mucocele. For specific cause, the diagnosis may require routine radiography, ultrasonography, advanced diagnostic method, computed tomography, magnetic resonance imaging for better visualization in the forms, diameter, position and determination of the lesion's origin. Main is the oral mucocele shall be differentiated from the lymphomas, oral hemangiomas, oral lymphangioma, benign or malignant salivary gland neoplasm, venous varix irrational fibromas, oral lymph epithelial cyst, gingival cyst, soft tissue abscesses, cyster sarcoidosis, pyogenic granulomas. The superficial mucocele may be confused with the cicatricial, pemphigoid, or bullous lichens planus, which are the skin manifestation along with oral presentation. The treatment of oral mucocele shall either be complete excision, then marsupialization, sometimes dissection, cryosurgery, carbon dioxide laser use, electrocautery, or sometimes we have to give the intralesional injection of sclerosant to reduce the size and get the fibrotic to remove completely after fibroma. However, recurrence can occur and few surgical interventions are again necessary. The investigation of Mentitel, Emosevaitel, Oliveira additionally revealed the comparable outcome as of our review with the male to female preponderance. Our outcome correlated the discoveries about the event of sore at lower lip, other oral site. Shockingly, our discoveries repeated the discoveries of the previous studies findings. At the point when there is extravasation blister reach out into the submandibular or submental space, they are called diving ranula or plunging ranula. In conclusion, the non-neoplastic elements of the salivary organ represent an analytical and remedial test to the clinicians. We have to detect it properly. due to close likeness of clinical introduction regardless of various etiologies. For example, reactionary, sometimes reactionary inflammatory procedures, metabolic or some other issues, contamination, iatrogenic reactions may give rise to the blisters in the oral cavities. Consequently, the clinical information of oral source and other, in addition, the assurance of viewpoints identified with etiopathogenesis of the source and the oral region is essential for the right analysis and for the science of suitable treatment. These were the references, and thank you so much.
Dr. Sambhaji, what precautions are you going to take during the surgery to prevent injury to the Wharton's duct?
Most we have to do the fine dissection, and many times we do the marsupializations of these ranulas by taking over the superficialis over the lesions, incisions over the lesions, not at the base of the lesions. Recurrences of these mucosals are very common specifically in the lip regions and in the sublingual regions. They are very common occurring because of the remnant of the some part of the sac wall. Marsupialization, excision, cauterization, and laser surgery, these are all were included in our studies. Different type of, even in a few of the mucosals in the that came in the submandibular region, we have given the sclerosant also. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, the next paper is Dr. Vandana Thoravade.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Dr. Vandana Thoravade, presenting a retrospective study on mucormycosis we did in COVID pandemic. It was a study over 110 patients, duration over 2 months, aimed at to study different clinical presentation in cases of rhino orbitocerebral mucormycosis, to study the different risk factors, different modalities of treatment for effective management as per staging of the disease, to study the recurrence rate, and to study the importance of clinical histopathological correlation for effective management in mucormycosis. The study duration being 2 months in second wave of COVID pandemic in the month of August and September 2021. It was a cross-sectional descriptive retrospective study. All the patients admitted diagnosed with COVID, proven microbiologically or histopathologically in our tertiary referral center who were treated surgically were the sample size. The age range was between 18 years to 82 years. Males were more in number than females. The presenting symptoms ranged from facial pain and facial swelling, the topmost presentation. Next to it was fever. Others were headache, ophthalmic symptoms, nasal stuffiness, oral symptoms. Risk factors we encountered in large number of patients, in about 62 patients, they were given high doses of steroid, that too for prolonged duration, and 68 were previously known diabetic patients, 34 were recently detected diabetic patients, 44 were given immunomodulators during COVID management. We investigated by nasal endoscopy. We showed Ishtar formation that everybody knows now. We took out sample for KOH and sent for culture also, for fungal culture. CT scan was done for each and every patient, showing mucosal thickening, hypo and hyperdensity, bony thinning and erosion, soft tissue edema, fat standing. MRI was done as per need of the patient to rule out or to confirm orbital and intracranial invasion, cavernous sinus thrombosis if suspected, base skull involvement, neural involvement, perineural spread, etc. The culture was done on savurodextrozagar or potassium dextrozagar. We classified our patient, 110 patients, by Honauer as per Honauer et al. Stage 1, that is nasal mucosa involvement only in 15 patients. Nose and PNS in 35. Nose PNS plus orbit in 50. And CNS involvement in 10 patients. All these patients were started with liposomal amphotericin B at the earliest in the dose of 3 to 5 milligram per kg diluted in 100 ml of 5% dextrose slowly given, monitored over 3 hours duration. BSL monitoring is mandatory, daily done. Renal function tests were monitored every alternate day. Out of 50 ROM patients, 18 were given transretrovalvular amphotericin B by ophthalmologist. And we could save the rest of the orbits. Only one patient required orbital exentration. Phase debridement was done in 100 patients, whereas phase with orbital decompression was done in 3. Revision debridement was done required for 12 patients, palatectomy alone for 15, maxillectomy for 10. All these patients were followed up for 6 months. Every weekly follow-up for next 2 months were advised after discharge, and for next 2 months, for next 4 months, they were asked to come every monthly. During treatment and during follow-up, we lost 3 patients. Those were of ROCM, and 2 patients succumbed of pulmonary mucormycosis. Fortunate enough and surprising, those patients who initially showed intracranial involvement, maybe in the form of cavernous sinus thrombosis, IJV, and internal carotid artery thrombosis, after debridement, were put on posaconazole after discharge for 2 to 3 weeks. They still keep on coming for follow-up, and they are doing well. Some of our clinical presentation, our patients operated, showing palatal involvement in different forms. Very initial manifestation may be in the form of granulation at the alveolar margin. Some patient presented with cheek abscess, and when drained, underlying necrosed maxilla could be seen. Unfortunately, we lost these 3 ROCM patients. Different intraoperative with orbital exentration cases, intraoperative pictures, maxillectomy. We know that once the patient immunity improves, sugar is controlled, amphotericin B is started. During intraoperative intervention, one can make out there is definitely a demarcation line between healthy and unhealthy bone. Similarly, in the soft tissues also, we can easily take out that. Another maxillectomy specimen. But the tricky thing is, one has to go beyond the granulations which are seen at demarcation line to prevent recurrence. Palatal reconstruction is not a major issue. Dentist definitely can give prosthesis. Mucormycosis is nothing but an acute fulminant invasive form of fungal sinusitis, causative agent being mold of fungi, genus Rhizopus, Mucor, Cunninghamilla, etc. It is an opportunistic infection that aggressively invades the vital structures of face and human body. The incidence increased 300 times in the second wave of COVID, and morbidity was 30 to 40%. The commonly affected bone everybody must have encountered is maxilla, next was zygoma, because of minute vessels and porosity. One acquires infection through inhaled dust contaminated with the fungi. Pathology is microinvasion, vessel invasion, angioinvasive nature, leading to avascular necrosis of involved soft tissues as well as bone, coagulation necrosis, infiltration by neutrophils, and perineural spread. CBC shows typically neutropenia. Blood test, rest of the blood test shows increased levels of serum, iron levels, blood glucose monitoring, very essential. Similarly, deranged values of electrolyte is essential. Treatment plan, surgical as well as medical management goes in hand and needs very aggressive and immediate management. So severity of the COVID-19, it absolutely corresponds to hyperglycemia state. COVID-19 infection may affect over the beta cells of pancreas, or there may be autoimmunity, or there can be increased stress response to severe COVID infection leading to glucocorticoids poured into the systemic circulation and uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. Whatever may be the reason, there is upregulation of GRP78 which enhances tissue penetration, impaired cellular mobility, free iron being available in the systemic circulation, leads to proliferation of the fungus and invasion into the tissues. Surgical protocol for debridement cannot be standardized. It can be face, it can be infratemporal approach, temporal fossa approach, skull base. Amphotericin, how it works? It binds with ergosterol, leading to leakage of cations and fungal death, while posaconazole and isavuconazole, they are step-down therapy. Next. Sorry. To conclude, in mucormycosis COVID-19, the predisposing factor in our study was uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, steroid and immunomodulators, irrational use, we can say, multiple modality of treatment, combined approach, antifungal as well as surgical, early diagnosis and prompt surgical management with medical management gives successful outcome. Thank you. And these are certain references used for this study. Thank you.
While giving the medical line of treatment, amphotericin, in your personal series, what challenges did you face?
Sir, many of the patients, they themselves refused taking amphotericin B because of severe nausea and vomiting. Management of potassium and calcium levels was very tricky. Many of the times we had to take opinion of neurophysician, physicians and cardiologists to adjust the dose. Unless these things are managed, we were unable to take the patient for OT. That was very challenging.
You said that face debridement.
Yes, sir.
Actually, it's a very vague terminology.
Yeah.
What exactly can
Whatever-
you tell me basically? What you in face? What exactly did you
Actually,
do?
I should not have said face because whatever necrotic area comes around, we had to go on debriding.
Yeah.
It is not functional. Whatever comes across.
you can definitely see a modified Denkers.
Yeah.
You can say
Yeah.
that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So last presentation is by Dr. Tanvi Patil.
Good afternoon all. Today my topic of presentation, that is total soft wall reconstruction of the posterior canal wall. It is a canal wall down procedure and reconstruction of the external-auditory canal only with soft tissues such as skin, temporalis fascia, tragal cartilage palisades. We all know middle ear is getting ventilated by two transmucosal gaseous exchange, that is accounts for 80% of the function, and eustachian tube, which is for 20% responsible ventilation. In cholesteatoma, basic aims of mastoid surgery are skin should be excised or exteriorized and ventilated from atmospheric air, that is a continuous ventilation. Mucosa or endothelium has to be interiorized and should be ventilated with the virtue of eustachian tube only. Humanly, it is not possible as there are vital structures like dura, sigmoid sinus. So what we do a canal wall down in which you try to remove the endothelium from mastoid by polishing burr. Cavity gets skin line and remaining endothelium gets buried below it. So we get cavity problems like weeping, cellular cavity. So what other option we have? We can do an intact canal wall down mastoidectomy, which is difficult to do, and there are chances of residual cholesteatoma. Second look surgery is mandatory. So what we have invented, do a canal wall down procedure, but preserve the middle ear and mastoid mucosa and reconstruct the posterior canal wall with the materials like temporalis fascia, tragal cartilage palisades, skin to reconstruct, which we call it as total soft wall reconstruction of the posterior canal wall. So you get the advantages of intact canal wall technique and safety of a canal wall down procedure. Our procedure mainly aims to preserve the middle ear mastoid mucosa, especially the epitympanic mucosa, to investigate the advantages of canal wall reconstruction over open procedures, to review long-term hearing results and impact of posterior canal wall reconstruction in patient with cholesteatoma. A total 2,000 group of patients had undergone canal wall down mastoidectomy along with the posterior canal wall reconstruction from Jan 2000 to Feb 2015. They were grouped into 500 revision cases, 1500 fresh cases. Age group was roughly 7 to 70 years of age. Patients were included, patient willing for follow-up, fresh cholesteatoma patient, residual cholesteatoma patient, cavity problems patient, patients which were excluded, invasive cholesteatoma, small attic limited cholesteatomas, where epitympanic mucosa cannot be preserved and where surgeon is not sure that the cholesteatoma is removed completely. Patient examination was done in detail, preoperative otomicroscopy as well as hearing assessment was done, surgery were performed by the same surgeon, canal wall down procedure was performed in all with inside out technique and posterior canal wall reconstruction was done. These are the materials I mentioned before also: temporalis fascia, subcutaneous tissue along with the periosteum, free skin grafts, trigger cartilage palisades. In first figure, you can see there is posterior superior defect, probe is going inside completely. In second figure, we have completed our resection of cholesteatoma with inside out technique with the preservation of epitympanic mucosa. In fourth picture, we have completed our canal wall down procedure. We all can see middle fossa dura, sigmoid sinus, oval window, round window. Facial ridge is lower and thin along the lateral canal level. In fourth picture, we have completed our ossiculoplasty as well as our lateral aortic reconstruction. Ossiculoplasty, we have kept a tragal cartilage palisades at about 5 o'clock position and one more used for supporting it going up to the annulus, and lateral aortic reconstruction is done. Large temporalis fascia grafting was done reaching up to the outer table of the mastoid. In among 2000 patients in last 15 years, in first 5 years, 20% failure was seen. After that, 5 to 10% noted. Here, failure means medalization of our soft wall. Sex-wise, there were 1200 male, 800 females. Age-wise, pediatric age group was roughly about 7 to 16 years of age. Adult were 18 to 17 years of age. Complication-wise, what we have encountered, 2 developed residual cholesteatoma, 2 had acute otitis media, and 20 developed medialization of our reconstructed soft wall. So what we have gained, we were follow up the patient at the end of 3 and 6 months with the otomicroscopy and pure tone audiometry to look for occurrence of any complication. Our study removed the posterior canal wall integrally, resected the cholesteatoma and reconstructed the posterior canal wall. Materials, soft tissue materials, temporalis fascia, free skin graft were used. There is a statistically significant reduction seen in post-operative AB gap, that is, majority of the patients had hearing improvement within 25 decibels overall. Similar study were performed by Hosai and Murata in 1998. What they have observed, none of the patients experienced post-operative narrow retraction pocket formation, neither severe cavity problems. In study by Begg in 2016, 5 of their patients developed otorrhea. In study by Hatano, some of the patients of tympanic membrane perforation seen and otitis media, which we also saw in our study. Also, study by Smith in 1986, soft wall reconstruction of the posterior canal wall. A variable amount of soft wall retraction was seen, what we also encountered. And you can say a pioneer, Takahashi, he did the same study. The results of our study for a period of epithelialization are similar to his study, and post-operative period to be a dry ear was significantly shorter in soft wall reconstruction group rather than the canal wall down and open group. What we have concluded, everybody treats squamous epithelium, that is cholesteatoma, but forgets to treat the mastoid mucosa. So try to preserve it and make arrangements for a ventilating middle ear and mastoid. Total reconstruction of the posterior canal wall should be of soft wall only. This method is safe for eliminating the problem of mastoid cavity. Also, a single stage procedure for cholesteatoma removal and canal wall reconstruction. Here we can see we have started doing the procedure. Posterior superior defect was seen. We have started drilling out the disease with inside out technique. We have resected the cholesteatoma completely. Now here we have completed our ossiculoplasty, which I mentioned before also. 5 o'clock cartilage over the stapes full plate going up to the annulus, as well as we have completed our lateral aortic reconstruction. True tragal cartilage palisades were used for that. By putting the probe behind the tragal cartilage palisades, we are trying to tell, or we are trying to show that it will be ventilating middle ear and mastoid cavity. Air can go around in 360 locked position in this ear. Here our graft was a little bit smaller, so we have trying to harvest one more periosteal tissue for the lengthening of the graft so that it can go up to the outer table of the mastoid. We have harvested it. Moving on, we are trying to join our extra periosteal tissue. We have already put the temporalis fascia. We are trying to join the temporalis fascia along the periosteal tissue so that the cavity get covered completely. Not a single raw area you can see here. We are covering the cavity till the outer table of the mastoid. As you can see, placement of the skin graft is also done. We are deposited the skin flaps also. Now, lastly, we will try to elevate whatever grafting was done, and we will examine whatever the ossiculoplasty we have done, lateral attic reconstruction is done, is in place or not. If these palisades are disturbed, reposit them to the position, try to suction out the blood, and complete the procedure. By pressing over each quadrant of the grafting, we are trying to show you air is entrapped there. You can see my graft got little bit disturbed, so we'll try to reposit then. Here we have completed our meatoplasty. A largest size ear speculum can going inside the ear very well. We have given just a small incision extending endorally so that meatoplasty gets completed. By pressing, again, we are trying to show you, we have reconstructed the posterior canal wall with the help of soft tissue only, and nothing raw area will be seen. After healing, it looks like this. You cannot see a single cavity here, you cannot see any raw area. Tympanic membrane will be similar to that of a normal tympanic membrane. These are my references. Thank you.
I would like to ask you why you are insisting for only soft wall reconstruction.
Because sir,
Means
soft wall reconstruction means sir, we can use the temporalis fascia, any soft material. Hard wall will be get expelled out, so we have to use soft wall material only.
expelled out means.
It gets failure, sir.
So hard wall means what do you mean to say? Which material?
Sir, I have not tried any hard wall, but according to the papers and literatures, if you use other metallic things, it will get obliterated.
It's foreign material.
Yes, foreign material. Foreign body reaction will be there and they will be get expelled out.
Suppose you use bone pate, bone dust. Will you call it hard or soft?
I will call it bone. If I will use, I will call it hard, sir.
So have you used that bone?
No, sir. We have done only soft wall reconstruction.
So ultimately this procedure you mean to say it is a canal wall reconstruction or obliteration of the mastoid cavity?
We will call it as canal wall reconstruction, sir. We are not obliterating
But
here.
it will be obliterating also, no, because I don't see cavity there.
Because, sir, we have covered till the outer table of the mastoid, so you cannot see a cavity there.
So at the most you can say it's a small cavity.
No, sir. There will be no cavity. In the last picture we have seen. Sorry, sir?
So will it be looking like a...
No, sir. We have done a canal wall down mastoidectomy. So tympanomastoidectomy you can say.
You said that you had some 20 cases failure. I mean,
Yes, sir.
there was a retraction.
Yes, sir.
So have you thought that why it has occurred and what are you going to do about that in future?
Sir, because of the ventilation failure, that soft wall has got retracted.
The surgery will fail then.
Yes, sir. Means whatever our reconstruction, that got failure in that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All participants, please collect your certificates.
Please wait.
Please wait.
Please wait all the participants. We will be distributing the certificates.
I would like to request the chairpersons to please come forward. Dr. Prasad Swami, Dr. Shreyas Manglekar sir, Dr. Venkatesh Polar sir. I would like to request Dr. Prasad Swami sir to hand over the certificate to our judge, Dr. Bhalerao sir. Sir. Bhalerao sir. I'd also like to request Dr. Shreyas Manglekar sir to hand over the certificate to Shishir sir. I would like to request Dr. K.T. Patil sir to please come forward. I would like to request Dr. K.T. Patil sir to hand over the certificate to our chairpersons, Dr. Prasad Swami sir, Dr. Shreyas Manglekar sir, Dr. Shreyas Manglekar sir, Dr. Venkatesh Polavar sir, Polavar sir, chairperson. I would like to request Dr. Venkatesh Polavar sir to hand over the certificate to the contestants. Yes. Dr. Shashin Khadkekar, Dr. Sapna Parab, Dr. Sapna Parab, Dr. Anjana Mohite, Dr. Vandana Thorwade ma'am, Dr. Sanjay Bhagat sir, Dr. Sambhaji Jindale sir, Dr. Sambhaji sir, Dr. Tanvi ma'am, Dr. Tanvi ma'am. We would like to start our next session.